We all misbehave sometimes. Wanna change the world, indulge in some bad behavior.
Hello and welcome to Bad Behavior, the podcast where we talk about women, activism and positive change and our journey to being the best, baddest bitches we can possibly be. My name is Nicola.
I'm Rosalind.
And welcome!
Yay.
Did that in sync. So cool. Welcome to another episode, guys.
It's a really exciting episode this week. We're actually talking to an incredible woman in person about her badassery. But before we get on to that, Nicola, what have you been thinking about in terms of bad behavior this week?
Okay, so this is actually something that's been in my head for quite a while now. I think that feminism is experiencing a newfound trendiness in terms of the younger generation, which is super great and I'm so down for, but it worries me sometimes its origins. So let me explain that. So I'm sure you've at this point seen all the t-shirts, all the hats, all the pins and badges that say, feminist or everybody should be a feminist, girl power is a big one, all that kind of stuff. And it's really cool to see these seeping into the mainstream more because they're very on trend at the moment. But in my head, I have difficulties fully supporting it because I always think about where those shirts were made and by who, if that makes sense. So I want to know if that everybody should be a feminist shirt is actually supporting feminism in real time. So, the owner of that company who produced that shirt, is he just another rich old white dude, or is it, the woman who actually spoke those words? I think that probably in our journey as feminists haven't really experienced yet because it is very out in the open now and it's a pretty mainstream discussion. And so with that mainstreamness of that comes all these new things to think about,
Yeah, and I think how you consume something, it becomes a political act in many ways. You have to think about where it comes from. In the act of buying something, you can almost think of it as a vote. You're actually voting for that and giving purpose to that. You're giving your money to that. So I understand where you're coming from. On the other hand, though, there is such a big push from other people to say we don't need it. I've had people tell me that. So maybe the other way of looking at it is when I see young women with the word feminist on their shirts, proudly claiming it in front of the world. That's a really powerful message too. And as with any fad, you see your friends embracing some kind of idea and you're more willing to look into it and understand it and explore it. So it's kind of pros and cons when you think about that.
It is cool to see, and when it all comes down to it, representation does matter. And what you were saying about people thinking it's cool, like young girls seeing their friends and, that being the trendy thing that is shown in magazines or in the mainstream fashion world, like people are going to start picking up on that and supporting it. It's just more so when I think about like what comes next. You proclaim yourself with this t-shirt and that's super great. Good for you for taking a step in the right direction, because honestly, when we were learning about feminism, like when we were growing up, it would have been a lot scarier to wear a shirt like that or to even just openly label yourself as a feminist because it was really taboo. People didn't appreciate it as they do now, which shows how far we've come. It just makes me want to know the people who are benefiting from this trend and if they're women, if they're activists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand where you're going, and I think really pertinent in that is when you say what comes next. If you're buying shirts from just an organization that's making merchandise money off the purchase, you're not really putting forward anything except visibility, which is good in a way, but how do you take that visibility and form a movement and form a conscious critical look at the world, or form a conscious purpose or drive towards some kind of change that isn't just the fad or just the image of the person? So I think it's definitely something we have to think about when we buy it, and I don't think I have.
I mean, what you just said though is the visibility itself a type of movement? That's the question too, because the lines get super blurry and then you don't know. It's almost hard to find yourself in that single purchase, you know? Like, I'm not sitting here saying, no, I'll never buy a piece of feminist merchandise, because that's not true. It's just, I like to know in a way that if I'm buying something that supports something that I am so passionate about and that I work every day to try and, you know, change the world around me with these ideas, I'd like to know that it was benefiting the movement. Like, for instance, I have a shirt that says Nasty Woman, and I bought that because all the proceeds were going to Planned Parenthood in that initiative for t-shirts. But see, that's the thing again, you know, like, I'm not the judge and jury of who is able to buy what.
And I guess, you know, I always say things like I'm going to buy vintage and I'm not going to go into fast fashion. There's so many other concerns that then get tied into this idea, you know, and a lot of the time it is really simple. It's just, I want to go out and I want to buy a shirt that says this because, you know what, it's important to me. It's an important part of my identity now. And that is powerful, because as soon as people keep claiming that and keep sort of saying it out into the world, we can have that visibility and have that solidarity with other women. That is really important. So maybe the moral of the story is to just think on it sometimes when you can and make it a part of your life in whatever way you can. And I think I'm certainly going to start thinking about it more.
Yeah, it was something that had struck me as interesting. In the end, it is super cool to see those kinds of shirts and those kinds of pins and hats and everything, because it does start a conversation, which is really cool. And you almost feel solidarity in a way with people wearing those types of... I would so go up to someone in the street and be like, I love your bag, it's so beautiful. And that has happened to me too, when it's certain things that I wear that have messages on them and stuff like that. People will start conversations. I feel like this is one of the first times in my life where I've been able to track a change in this movement, and like a very tangible one, if that makes sense. Like one that's you can actually see around you, and that's super interesting to me. And I always think, to what end? Like, what is this contributing to?
I mean, it's true. When we were growing up, it was sort of our mothers were definitely driving forces, but we weren't a part of that really progressive movement and that big change and that big fight that they had. And now people are saying, oh, you know, some people are saying, oh, we don't need feminism, we've come far enough. But every single step of the way, there have been people putting up their hands and saying women have come far enough. The fact that we have photographs of women who didn't have the vote, like, we got the vote after the invention of the photograph. That's crazy. That's so crazy. We still have so long to go. We still have the gender pay gap, and we've still got, you know, so many glass ceilings in the world, that if young women are embracing it in any way they can, I can't help but feel that's positive. Even if we do need to check ourselves and look at where that product is coming from and take a moment to think about our effect on the world. You never know. It's interesting, especially in light of, it brings up for me the Make America Great Again hats that people wear, and how it became like this emblem of Trump voter. People would see it and go, oh, that's your political party. That's where you sit in this spectrum of ideas in the world. So I guess in a little way, it's that kind of visibility is very powerful. It makes you think certain things about people who wear it, and the more we have who wear it, the more you think, wow, it's a big, diverse, interesting movement rather than just a philosophical idea.
Yeah, well, I do like the idea of it becoming an emblem too, like a time capsule almost. I love the idea that people will look back in 20 years and that will be part of the fashion trends. Like, that's really cool to think about, and to think that we got to see young women wearing those types of things and displaying those messages, you know, from that, going out there and educating themselves. That makes me feel super happy.
We would love to hear about what you think on that issue. If you have any ethical stores that you get your stuff from, we'd love to know as well.
We have a really amazing guest with us today, Nevena Spirovska. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the show.
The pleasure is all mine.
We like to start every episode with a sneaky, cheeky little question. How have you been bad this week?
I've been terrible for humanity because I've embraced AI. I now have an artificially intelligent personal secretary named Amy. She's great. She's really helping me. I previously had one named Andrew, but just the annoyance of seeing his name in my inbox every day meant I had to fire him and get Amy on board. And she's doing really great.
That is so exciting to me.
Yeah, how does that even work?
It's on the computer, it's in your emails, it's in your calendar. So you pre-program Amy, you tell her a few secrets like who you're going with and where you're going to be. And from there, anyone who emails you, any calendar invite you get sent is all organised by her. We're thinking of going monogs, but TBC on that.
Next week we'll be interviewing Amy. So the first thing I'd love to speak about is your work with the National Homeless Coalition. So I was just wondering, like, how did you get involved being the vice president, and could you tell us a bit about what your job generally involves in that position?
It's an incredible grassroots charity that was founded just 2.5 years ago, and we do so much amazing work, not only with homelessness but social disadvantage and everything that means across Australia. So whether that's in an urban setting, whether that's in an Indigenous setting, half of our board is Indigenous, so we work with community elders to make sure we're always welcomed when we do our work. And we like to think of it as making solutions to some really complex problems that we have in society. We don't always have the answers, but we can help when we do. So one of our projects, Melbourne Period Project, we make period packs for women, trans men and gender non-conforming people experiencing homelessness. While that doesn't help solve the problem itself, it does provide a solution for those people in that very instance. So that's what we like to see ourselves as doing. I became involved a couple of years ago after putting my hand up, and I just fell in love with everything that we were doing. We're really good with money, and we make a dollar go a very long way. With other charities, they work in many different ways, and a lot are really good, and not surprisingly, a lot are really bad. We have so many charities in Australia, and I'm always a big believer in collaboration and connection. And I feel if a lot of us got together, we're all working on the same kind of issues, then we'd be looking more towards creating solutions and less towards becoming like Telstra Businesswoman of the Year.
My next question is about the Melbourne Period Project. People have a difficult time talking about homelessness, and then on top of that, you're talking about homeless women getting their periods. Like, do you find that difficult to talk to some people about?
Personally, I don't find it difficult at all. We made a very conscious decision to make it as visible as possible. So we're putting period right in the title where everyone can see it, because that addresses some of that taboo, and it makes us question, why is it a taboo in the first place when 50% of our population, a third of them at any given time, are going to be bleeding? So for us, it's just so important that in exposing that this is an issue, that it also addresses that taboo in doing so.
Is that one of the favourite projects that you've worked on?
Oh, like children, there is no favourite, but yes, that's definitely one of my favourites.
That's so great. Is your role people-facing a lot of the time? Like, do you get to actually work with the women who you're helping?
I am very fortunate in that part of my role is people-facing. So we work with over 65 agencies across Australia to distribute these period packs, and we do a lot of street walks as well. That's when we walk directly, and where we do like a little sensor so we know where to distribute these, so we are able to see where it goes. But it's just as rewarding if anyone follows the Facebook page. Our founder Donna does amazing updates about what it means to be able to change someone's life that month, that day, that minute, and that for me is the most gratification I get in being involved with this, and especially as vice president of it.
That's so amazing. And another incredible thing to happen earlier this year with you being nominated as the Australian delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. Do you want to just tell us a bit about your experience and how it was to actually go to a session like that and be around so many incredible women and change makers?
Being there was incredibly overwhelming. Not so much as, being in New York or being in the UN building. I think that was mostly bureaucratic, but to be surrounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of women from all different experiences, from all different countries, from places that don't even exist on a map, was for me by far the most rewarding part of that experience. And for anyone who's never heard of the Commission, and I hadn't till very recently, I might add, it's the largest conference for gender equality in the world, where all the member states of the United Nations get together and they write this policy paper, which essentially becomes the blueprint for gender equality that year. It's a bit of a shit fight, I'll be honest, because it is arguing word for word, and you think, you sit in a room with women and like, oh, this is going to end well, because you have all different faiths, all different beliefs, all different sides of politics. It goes down to arguing between the difference between the definition of family and families being more inclusive, more open and not nuclear. And I was really disappointed to learn that of all the conferences and commissions that the United Nations holds, the one for women is the one that is the most difficult because everything is a fight. Whereas in other commissions and conferences, they just vote. They just say, should we adopt this? Yes, no. A lot more collegial. But it also speaks to the dedication of all the people who go there to defend the rights of women around the world. And I just am still continually blown away by their efforts.
I was reading up a bit about that particular session, and it seemed like one of the main goals of it was about access to communication technology and the media and everything like that. So I was wondering what you personally think about how that impacts women and empowers them and gives them opportunities.
It's so important, and I think one that we take for granted, being so surrounded by technology. And when we say technology, it's not just access to your mobile phone, it's access to electricity, it's access to reception, it's access to the funds to get all of those things. And when you remove them from people, you remove agency. And like most inequality around the world, it affects women and girls the most. So when we take away their access to the internet, their world becomes smaller. When we take away their access to telecommunications, they can't communicate when they're in a difficult situation or if there is a crisis, be it a natural or unnatural one. They can't say, hey, I'm here, come and get me. They cease to exist. So that was one of the many reasons why technology was so important and why, not surprisingly, we need to ensure that there is parity with technology, that women and men and those in between have access to it and understand it and know and make efforts to close the technological gap, which I read the report of, it is real. Yeah. It is just as real as any other gender gap.
Another incredible thing, your involvement in the political arena too. We were wondering what advice you would have for young women trying to either manage or run their own campaigns or get elected to local office. Could you just talk a little bit about your experience doing it personally and some things maybe you wish you knew back in the day?
Definitely. I think like most things, work as a team, find a team, because success is not determined by an idea or a candidate or funds or the great platform you have. It's determined by the strength of your team, and that doesn't matter whether it's politics or any other venture you take part. But specifically in the political world, it's tough. It's tough out there, whether that's in the university setting, whether you are in parliament, or whether you're navigating the politics of life as they were. But in the more formalized setting, make that team, get organized and do it. Don't assume that the barriers that exist in the world are going to prohibit you from participating. Some of the things that I wish I knew when I started my political organizing career is whatever you think you're doing now, you need to have done it 6 months ago. So put it in your calendar. It might seem outrageous to be like, do I really need to be doing this now? You do. You absolutely do. You need to be organized. Network, but in a good way. Don't look to people as what they can give to you. Look at how can we work together, not now, but in the future. And nurture that network, because you never know when you're going to be calling on those people to, give you money or, who knows, vote for you. People will always remember how you made them feel. And if you prioritize them as a person in your life, in this lovely ecosystem, that will pay dividends. If you treat them like shit, they will remember when they see you on the ballot, they'll be like, oh, there's that. And they won't vote for you. So your impression goes a long way. And, check yourself in your political beliefs, because the party that you voted for a couple of years ago, maybe they were really great back then, but, what's changed now? If you have the ability to, do your homework, call them. That's what they're there for. Pester them. Say, hey, what is it that you're actually doing about that? There's lots of protests and posters, and we all get a little bit of bandwidth depth at the end of the day. So make sure you know where your vote's going or where your efforts are going, because your efforts and vote mean a lot.
You have a really cool Twitter bio, just by the way. So is campaigning for good, hoping for better? And it's a pretty general question. I was just wondering what your ideal version of better would be, like a couple of points of that. I know that's humongous.
Magic wand, I mean, I don't think we can really do anything in this particular country until we deal with the dispossession that Indigenous and First Nations people feel. I think, like, no matter what good we do, it's always going to be overshadowed by the fact that we are on stolen land. So yes, magic wand would fix that little problem. I think better is always whatever gender parity that we can achieve, and that's not always just earning a little bit more ourselves and having other people suffer the consequences of the patriarchy. So yeah, we'd crush the patriarchy, point 2. And if that magic wand has still got any life left in it, I'd love for the world to be a little bit less shit to the people who aren't at the top of the food chain. So I think we can all hope for people who are sleeping rough, who do experience social disadvantage, to have access to the kind of things that we love, like, houses and, financial stability. That to me is what a little bit better looks like.
Just one last thing. As we go forward with these episodes, we love getting recommendations for really cool women to talk about. Do you perhaps have a name of someone that's really inspired you that we should do a bit of research on and let everyone know about?
Definitely. Her name is Simona. She is an incredible woman and does a lot of stuff in the architecture and gender space. So really interesting. She's really blown my mind on how we define space and how we interact with space and how space affects us. Whenever I see or hear or listen to Simona, I'm always a little bit more better off for doing so. And she's also an amazing musician. So definitely speak to Simona.
Yes, we will. That is such a good recommendation. We did it. One of our previous episodes was actually on architecture. And once you look into it a bit and do a bit of research about all the amazing feminists involved in it, it's crazy how it can redefine just the way you look at buildings or walk into spaces. You got to think about that, the history of where you're walking and who actually designed it. Thank you so much for being on Bad Behaviour.
Till next time.